Modern Man in Search of a Soul, by C.G. Jung. Introduction. I want to tell you a story. It's a true story, and it's a chilling one. There was once a man, a brilliant man, a colleague of the great psychologist Carl Jung. This man was an avid mountaineer, someone who found life and joy in climbing the highest, most dangerous peaks. One day, he met Jung on the street and, with a laugh, told him about a strange dream he'd had. In the dream, he was climbing a high mountain. The higher he climbed, the better he felt, a feeling of pure ecstasy washing over him. When he reached the very summit, his happiness was so immense that he felt he could just keep climbing, right up into the empty air. And in the dream, that's exactly what he did. He stepped off the peak and continued to climb, walking on nothing, ascending into the blue void. He woke up in a state of sheer bliss. Jung, hearing this, grew very serious. He knew dreams were not just random nonsense, they were messages from the deepest part of the soul. He looked at his friend and pleaded with him, "My dear man, I know you love the mountains. But I'm begging you. From now on, do not go mountaineering alone. When you go, take 2 guides, and promise me you will follow their instructions to the letter." The man just laughed. Incorrigible, he called Jung, and walked away. 2 months later, the man was climbing alone when he was buried by an avalanche. By a sheer miracle, a military patrol happened to be nearby and dug him out just in time. But he didn't learn. 3 months after that, he went climbing again, this time with a younger friend, but with no guides. An alpinist watching from below saw the man descending a steep rock wall. And then, he saw him do the impossible. He saw him, in the words of the witness, literally step out into the air. He fell onto his friend below, and both were dashed to pieces on the rocks far, far below. What does a story like this tell us? It tells us that there is a part of our mind, a deep, ancient, powerful part, that knows things we don't. A part that speaks to us in the strange language of dreams and symbols. And it tells us that ignoring that voice can have consequences that are all too real. Today, we're going to journey into the world of the man who understood this better than almost anyone, Carl Gustav Jung. Our guide will be his masterpiece, Modern Man in Search of a Soul. This isn't just a book, it's an exploration into the single most urgent question of our time, in a world where all the old answers seem to be failing, where religion, tradition, and science have left so many of us feeling empty and lost. Where do we find a meaning for our lives? Jung, who was once the chosen successor to Sigmund Freud before their famous break, dedicated his entire life to this question. He saw hundreds of patients, not all of whom were sick in the typical sense. Many were successful, intelligent people who had everything the world could offer, but felt a profound sense of emptiness. Their lives had lost their meaning. They were, in Jung's words, in search of a soul. By the end of our journey today, you will understand the map Jung created for this search. You will learn about the hidden landscape of your own mind, the unconscious, the shadow, the dreams, and you will discover why Jung believed that the greatest adventure you can ever undertake is the journey inward, to find the meaning that is already waiting for you in the deepest parts of your own being. Book summary. Have you ever felt it? That quiet, nagging feeling that something is missing. You can be in a crowded room, surrounded by friends, with your favorite music playing, and still feel a sense of emptiness. A feeling of being disconnected. You might be achieving your goals, getting good grades, making your family proud, but deep down there's a question that whispers, "Is this all there is?" If you've ever felt that, then you have felt the central problem of our time. It's the spiritual problem of modern man. This is where our journey with Carl Jung begins. Jung was a physician, a psychiatrist. People came to him to be cured of their neuroses, their anxieties, their compulsions, their depressions. But Jung quickly realized that he couldn't just treat the symptom. He had to treat the whole person. And what he found, especially in patients over the age of 35, was something astonishing. He said, "Among all my patients in the second half of life, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life." Now, hold on. When Jung says religious, he isn't talking about going to church or following a specific creed. He's talking about a deeper human need. The need for meaning. The need to feel that your life is part of a story that is bigger than just you. For thousands of years, this need was met by religion. The world was a meaningful place. The earth was the center of the universe, and humanity was the cherished creation of God. Life had a clear purpose: to follow a divine plan and prepare for an eternal reward. But then, something happened. As Jung puts it, science tore this lovely veil to shreds. We discovered we live on a small planet, orbiting a mediocre star, in a forgotten corner of an incomprehensibly vast universe. The old stories, for many, lost their power. The gods who once spoke to us from mountains and burning bushes fell silent. And man became, in a way, homeless. This created a void, an emptiness in the soul of the modern world. And into this void, our anxieties, our neuroses, our feelings of meaninglessness began to rush. We tried to fill this void with other things. We created new gods: the god of money, the god of success, the god of popularity, the god of reason. We told ourselves that if we could just achieve enough, earn enough, or be liked enough, we would finally feel whole. But it doesn't work. Because these things are all on the outside. And the problem, Jung realized, is on the inside. So, if the answers aren't out there in the world, where do we look? Jung's answer was revolutionary. He said we must turn around. We must look inward. We must explore the one territory that modern man has been taught to fear and ignore: his own psyche, his own soul. But how do you explore an invisible world? Where's the map? Where's the doorway? Jung found the doorway in the most overlooked and misunderstood part of our lives: our dreams. Think about it. We spend almost a third of our lives asleep. And in that time, our minds are not silent. They are creating stories, images, and feelings of incredible vividness. Most people dismiss them. Oh, it was just a dream. But for Jung, a dream was never just a dream. It was a letter from the deepest, wisest part of yourself. Now, at the time, the great Sigmund Freud had his own theory of dreams. Freud believed that dreams were essentially wish fulfillment. They were clever disguises for our repressed desires, mostly sexual ones, that we couldn't admit to in our waking lives. To understand a dream, you had to decode it, to peel back the facade to find the secret, often ugly, wish hiding beneath. Jung studied with Freud. He was his star pupil, the man Freud called his crown prince. But Jung couldn't shake the feeling that Freud's theory was too small. It was like saying a great piece of music is just a collection of notes, or a beautiful painting is just a mixture of pigments. It missed the bigger picture. Jung believed that dreams weren't trying to hide things. They were trying to reveal things. They are the natural, unvarnished expression of your inner world. He said, the dream gives a true picture of the subjective state. It doesn't care what you think you should feel. It doesn't care about your ego or your ambitions. It simply shows you how things really are, deep down. Jung learned to trust the dream like a doctor trusts a lab result. If sugar appears in the urine, he said, then the urine contains sugar. It's a fact. A dream, for Jung, was a psychic fact. Let me show you what this means with one of Jung's own stories. a man came to see him, a man who was incredibly successful. He'd come from a poor, humble background, and, through sheer talent and ambition, had climbed to a very high position in society. He was at the peak of his career, with even greater things on the horizon. But he was suffering. He had a constant sense of anxiety and insecurity. He complained of dizziness, a heavy head, difficulty breathing. The exact symptoms of mountain sickness. Isn't that perfect? A man who had climbed so high in life was now suffering from mountain sickness. The man told Jung he'd had 2 dreams the night before. In the first dream, he was back in the small village where he was born. He saw some of the peasant boys he went to school with. He walked right past them, pretending not to know them. And he heard one of them say, "He doesn't often come back to our village." The dream is pulling him back to his roots. It's saying, you're forgetting where you came from. You're forgetting the humble ground you stand on. Then came the second dream. I am in a great hurry because I am going on a journey. I can't find my baggage. Time is flying, the train is about to leave. Finally, I get everything together and rush to the station. Then I realize I've forgotten a briefcase with important papers. I run back, find it, and race towards the station again, but I can barely make any headway. With a final effort, I rush onto the platform, only to see the train steaming out of the station. It's a very long train, running in a curious S-shaped curve. It occurs to me that if the driver isn't careful and puts on full steam on the straight stretch, the rear coaches, still on the curve, will be thrown off the rails. As a matter of fact, the driver opens the throttle. The rear coaches rock frightfully, and are actually thrown off the rails. There is a terrible catastrophe. I awake in terror. You don't need to be a genius to understand this dream, do you? The man's frantic ambition is the driver of the train, going full steam ahead. But the rest of his personality, the rear coaches, can't keep up. The dream was a warning. It was telling him, if you continue on this path, at this speed, you are headed for a catastrophe. Jung tried to tell him this. He tried to explain that the man's neurosis was a message from his soul, telling him to slow down, to be content with what he had achieved. But the man wasn't satisfied with this. He wanted to keep climbing. And events ran their course exactly as the dream had predicted. The man pushed himself further, took on more than he could handle, and had a complete breakdown. The train wreck happened in his actual life. This story shows us something crucial about Jung's approach. A dream is not just about the past. It's not just about some childhood trauma. It can be a prognosis, a look into the future. It's a form of guidance. The unconscious part of our mind sees the whole picture, the long game, in a way our conscious ego often can't. And this leads us to one of Jung's most important ideas, the principle of compensation. Think of your psyche, your inner world, like a self-regulating system, much like your body. If you get too hot, your body sweats to cool you down. If you get too cold, it shivers to warm you up. It's always seeking balance, or homeostasis. Jung believed the psyche works the same way. The relationship between your conscious mind, the part you think of as you, and your unconscious mind, the vast, hidden part, is compensatory. If your conscious attitude becomes too one-sided, the unconscious will produce dreams and fantasies to pull you back into balance. Let me give you another of Jung's examples. A young man had an excellent relationship with his father. He admired him deeply. His father was an unusually successful and respected man. The young man was, in every sense, a good son. But he came to Jung with a troubling dream. In the dream, his father was driving his new car, but driving it very clumsily, like an idiot. He was weaving back and forth, getting into tight spots. Finally, he ran the car right into a wall, badly damaging it. The young man, in the dream, shouted at his father in a rage. Then he saw that his father was dead drunk. Now, what does this mean? A Freudian approach might say, aha, you see, your good relationship with your father is just a facade. Deep down, you hate him, you resent his authority, and you wish him ill. This would be a destructive thing to tell the young man, and for Jung, it didn't feel true to the situation. So Jung asked a different question. Instead of asking why did he have this dream, he asked, what is this dream for? What is the dream trying to do? Clearly, the dream is trying to depreciate the father, to tear down his image. If this is a compensation, what conscious attitude is it compensating for? The conclusion Jung reached was this: the young man's relationship with his father wasn't just good, it was too good. His admiration was so complete that he was living in his father's shadow. He hadn't developed his own personality, his own authority. He was at risk of never becoming his own man because there was too much father everywhere. So the unconscious manufactures this blasphemy. It shows him a negative, drunken image of his father, not to say this is who your father really is, but to say this is what you need to see to create some distance. It forces the son to contrast himself with his father, and in that contrast, to find himself. This interpretation struck home. It won the young man's immediate assent, because it felt true. It didn't destroy his love for his father, it helped him begin the healthy and necessary process of becoming his own person. This is the genius of Jung's approach. It's not about reducing everything to a simple, often negative, formula. It's about listening to the psyche, trusting its wisdom, and understanding its quest for balance and wholeness. This quest for wholeness requires us to confront a part of ourselves that most of us would rather pretend doesn't exist. Jung called it the shadow. The shadow is the other person in us. It's everything we repress, everything we deny about ourselves, everything we don't want to be. It's our dark side, our greed, our anger, our vanity, our cowardice. Most people spend their lives trying to run away from their shadow. We project it onto others. The things we hate most in other people are often the things we can't stand in ourselves. When we point a finger at someone else, Jung would remind us, 3 fingers are pointing back at ourselves. We fight our shadow, we deny it, we pretend it's not there. But this is a terrible mistake. Because the shadow, for all its darkness, is a source of immense energy, vitality, and creativity. Jung said, "How can I be substantial if I fail to cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole." Trying to be only good, only light, only perfect, is like trying to live in a world with no night. It's unnatural and, ultimately, sterile. Wholeness is not about being perfect, it's about embracing all the parts of yourself, the light and the dark. The process of confronting and integrating the shadow is one of the most difficult and most important tasks in the journey of self-discovery. As we explore this inner world, Jung realized that people tend to have a default setting, a habitual way of relating to the world. He saw that this attitude splits humanity into 2 broad categories that you've surely heard of: introverts and extroverts. This might sound simple, but Jung's understanding of it was incredibly deep. The extrovert's energy naturally flows outwards, towards the object, towards people, things, and activities in the external world. They feel most alive and most themselves when they are interacting with the world. They are energized by social gatherings. Their focus is on what is happening outside of them. The introvert's energy, on the other hand, naturally flows inwards, towards the subject, towards their own thoughts, feelings, and inner world. They find their energy in solitude, in reflection. For them, the outer world can be draining, and their primary reality is the one that exists inside their own minds. It's crucial to understand that one is not better than the other. They are simply 2 different, equally valid ways of being in the world. A society that only values extroversion, as ours often does, forces the introvert to pretend to be someone they're not, which is a recipe for exhaustion and unhappiness. But Jung went even further. He realized that within these two broad types, people have different ways of perceiving and judging the world. He identified 4 primary psychological functions. 2 are for perceiving, for taking in information. Sensation tells you that something exists. It's your 5 senses, focused on the concrete reality of the here and now. Intuition tells you where something came from and where it might be going. It's that flash of insight, that hunch, that perception of possibilities that seems to come from nowhere. And 2 are for judging, for making decisions about that information. Thinking tells you what something is. It's the function of logic, analysis, and objective truth. Feeling tells you what something is worth. It's not about emotion in the sense of being happy or sad. It's a rational function of evaluation, of deciding whether something is good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, acceptable or unacceptable. Each of us has all 4 functions, but we tend to prefer one over the others. It becomes our dominant function, the tool we trust most. Another becomes our secondary, or auxiliary, function. And the other 2 remain less developed, more unconscious. By combining the 2 attitudes introvert/extrovert with the 4 functions, Jung created his famous theory of psychological types. There's the extroverted thinking type, the introverted feeling type, and so on. Understanding your type isn't about putting yourself in a box. It's about understanding your natural strengths, your operating system, and also recognizing your weaknesses, the parts of yourself you need to develop to become more balanced and whole. This process of development, of becoming more balanced and whole, is not a journey that stays the same throughout our lives. One of Jung's most profound and beautiful contributions is his idea of the stages of life. He compares a human life to the course of the sun across the sky. The first phase, the morning, is childhood. In this stage, we are not yet our own person. We are enclosed in the psychic atmosphere of our parents. We are a problem for others, but we have no real problems of our own. The second phase, the morning of life proper, begins after puberty and extends to middle age, somewhere between the ages of 35 and 40. This is the time for turning outwards. The great task of life's morning is to build a strong ego, to find a profession, to create a family, to make our mark on the world. It's a period of expansion, of conquering our piece of the world. All our energy is, and should be, directed outwards. But then, at noon, something changes. The sun reaches its zenith and begins its descent. This is the afternoon of life. And this, for Jung, is a critical, and often dangerous, turning point. He writes, "We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning, for what was great in the morning will be little at evening, and what in the morning was true will at evening have become a lie." The goals of the morning, ambition, achievement, expansion, are no longer enough. To continue clinging to them is to become a touching old gentleman, as Jung puts it, stuck in the past, boring and stereotyped. The person who cannot let go of their youth becomes neurotic, always looking backward, shrinking from the thought of aging and death. The great task of the afternoon of life is the exact opposite of the morning. It is a time for turning inward. It is a time for self-reflection, for finding the meaning of one's individual life. It's a time for culture, for wisdom, for preparing for the final mystery of death. He asks, are there perhaps colleges for 40-year-olds which prepare them for their coming life and its demands? The answer, of course, is no. We are thrown into the second half of life completely unprepared, with the false assumption that the ideals and truths that served us in the morning will serve us now. And they won't. This is why so many people experience a midlife crisis. It's a crisis of meaning. The soul is demanding a change of direction, and the conscious ego is resisting. Jung believed that our religions were once the great schools for the afternoon of life. They taught people how to grow old, how to face death, and how to connect with a sense of eternity. But for the modern man, these schools have largely lost their authority. And so, we are left to find the way on our own. This journey is what Jung called the process of individuation. It is the process of becoming an individual, that is, an undivided, whole person. This journey, whether undertaken with a therapist or on one's own, often follows 4 broad stages. Jung outlined these based on the evolution of psychotherapy. The first stage is confession. This is the simplest, most fundamental step. It's the act of bringing our secrets, our shadow, into the light. Jung says that maintaining secrets acts like a psychic poison, alienating us from our community and from ourselves. The simple act of confessing, of telling another human being our darkest truths, is an act of catharsis, of cleansing. It bridges the abyss that separates us and makes us human again. But confession alone is often not enough. Many patients, after confessing, would find themselves stuck in a childish dependence on the doctor. This led to the second stage, explanation. This is the stage of understanding why. This is the world of Freud and his contemporary, Alfred Adler. Freud sought to explain our problems by tracing them back to repressed sexuality and childhood experiences. Adler sought to explain them in terms of a will to power, a striving to overcome feelings of inferiority. Both are powerful tools for understanding. They help us see the origins of our patterns and conflicts. They bring insight. But insight, too, is often not enough. Jung found that even after a patient understood everything about their past and their neurosis, they were often still stuck. They were, in his words, an intelligent but still incapable child. This is because a neurosis creates bad habits, and you can't get rid of a habit just by understanding it. You have to replace it with a new one. This leads to the third stage, education. This is Adler's great contribution. It's not enough to understand, you must be educated as a social being. The patient must be prodded into new paths, trained in new habits, and guided toward normal adaptation to life. This is the practical, hands-on work of building a better life. For many people, this is enough. To be a normal, well-adapted social being is a wonderful achievement. But Jung worked with people for whom this was not the goal. He worked with people who were already successful, already well adapted. For them, being normal was a prison, a bed of procrustes, unbearable boredom, infernal sterility and hopelessness. Their problem was not that they couldn't become normal, their problem was that they were only normal. Their deepest need was to live an abnormal life in the best sense of the word, to find and live out their unique, individual destiny. This led Jung to the fourth and highest stage, transformation. This stage involves a profound shift. Here, the goal is not just to fix a problem, but to facilitate the birth of something new from within the soul. It's about connecting with the deep, creative forces of the unconscious. And this stage has a radical requirement. It demands the transformation not only of the patient, but of the doctor as well. Jung realized that psychotherapy is not a one-sided process where a detached expert fixes a passive patient. It is a relationship, a meeting of two personalities. He compared it to the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The doctor cannot guide the patient to a place he has not been willing to go himself. He cannot ask the patient to face his shadow if he has not faced his own. The doctor is just as much an analysis as the patient. He must be willing to be affected, to be changed, to grow. This is a profound and humble vision of the healing process. It takes psychology out of the sterile clinic and turns it into a human journey of self-education and self-perfectioning. This is the ultimate goal of Jung's psychology. It's not just to cure a neurosis. It is to help a person become what they were always meant to be. It's about the rediscovery of a meaningful life. And this, for Jung, is fundamentally a spiritual process. This is the great point of departure from his teacher, Freud. Freud was, in a sense, a man of the 19th century. He was a rationalist, a materialist. He saw the unconscious as a cellar filled with the repressed, antisocial desires of our childhood, the infantile perverse criminal parts of us. Religion, to him, was an illusion, a neurosis of mankind, a wish fulfillment for a father figure who could protect us from the harsh realities of life. Jung saw things very differently. He saw that the unconscious was not just a cellar, it was a vast, ancient ocean. It contained not just our personal repressed junk, but the collective inheritance of all humanity. He called this the collective unconscious. And within this collective unconscious, he discovered what he called archetypes. Archetypes are primordial images, universal patterns that have existed since the dawn of time. They are the psychic blueprints for the hero, the wise old man, the great mother, the shadow, the self. They are the characters that appear again and again in the myths, fairy tales, and religions of every culture on earth, because they are built into the very structure of our psyche. When we dream of a wise old man giving us advice, we are not just dreaming of a specific person. We are tapping into the archetype of the wise old man, a deep well of collective human wisdom. For Jung, the experience of these archetypes, the encounter with this deeper layer of the psyche, is the source of all true spiritual and religious experience. He saw that the spiritual problem of modern man comes from the fact that our conscious, rational world has become disconnected from this deep, archetypal world. We live in a world that is, in Jung's word, disenchanted. We have rationalized everything, and in doing so, we have cut ourselves off from the roots of our own being, from the source of life and meaning. The longing for meaning, the search for a soul, is the unconscious trying to reconnect us with this deeper reality. It's the psyche's attempt to heal itself, to become whole again. Jung's life's work was to act as a guide for this process. He taught that by paying attention to our dreams and fantasies, by engaging with the symbols that rise from our unconscious, we can begin to build a bridge back to this world of archetypes. We can begin to live a symbolic life, where even the smallest things have a deeper meaning. This is the path of individuation. It is a difficult path. It requires courage. It requires us to face our shadow. It requires us to let go of the certainties of our conscious ego and trust in a wisdom that is greater than our own. But it is a path that leads to a profound transformation. The goal is not to become a god, but to become a complete human being. The center of the personality shifts from the small, fragile ego to a new, larger center, which Jung called the self. The self is the archetype of wholeness, the union of the conscious and the unconscious, the divine spark within us. In the end, Jung's message is one of profound hope. He tells us that the meaning we seek is not lost. It is not something we have to invent. It is already there, waiting for us, in the undiscovered country of our own souls. The modern man who has lost his way in the disenchanted world can find it again, not by looking to the heavens, but by looking within. The journey is long, and it leads through darkness. But it is the journey that gives our lives their ultimate meaning. It is the search for the soul, which is, in the end, the search for ourselves. Commentary. As we come to the end of our exploration of modern man in search of a soul, it's worth pausing to reflect on just how radical and relevant Jung's ideas still are, nearly a century after they were written. We live in an age that is, in many ways, the hyper-accelerated version of the world Jung described. If modern man felt disconnected then, how much more so do we feel it now, in a world of social media, 24-hour news cycles, and endless digital distractions, we are more connected than ever, yet often feel more isolated. We have access to more information than any generation in history, yet wisdom seems harder to find. Jung's work is a powerful antidote to this condition. It is a call to slow down, to turn off the external noise, and to listen to the quiet, persistent voice of our own inner world. It reminds us that a meaningful life is not built from the outside in, but from the inside out. The most powerful lesson, for me, is Jung's re-enchantment of the psyche. In a world that often wants to reduce us to our brain chemistry, our behavioral patterns, or our demographic data, Jung insists on the reality and the dignity of the soul. He shows us that our inner world is not a chaotic mess of irrational impulses, but a cosmos in its own right, with its own laws, its own wisdom, and its own deep, creative purpose. He gives us a language to talk about the parts of ourselves that we often feel but cannot name, the shadow that we hide, the archetypal stories that shape our lives, and the deep, guiding intelligence of the self. So, how can we begin to apply this profound wisdom in our own lives, starting today? Here are a few simple, practical steps inspired by Jung's work. First, start a dream journal. This is the most practical step you can take to begin a dialogue with your unconscious. Keep a notebook by your bed, and the moment you wake up, write down anything you can remember from your dreams. Don't worry about interpreting them or figuring out what they mean. The first step is simply to honor them, to treat them as important messages. Just the act of writing them down sends a signal to your unconscious that you are listening. Over time, you will begin to notice patterns, recurring images, and themes. You can ask yourself simple questions. What feeling did this dream leave me with? What in my waking life does this remind me of? This is the beginning of a conversation that can last a lifetime. Second, begin to acknowledge your shadow. This can be challenging, but it is essential for wholeness. A simple way to start is to pay attention to what strongly irritates or fascinates you in other people. When you have a strong, emotional reaction to someone, either positive or negative, it's often a sign of a projection. Ask yourself, what is it about this person that gets under my skin? And then, the harder question, where does a small, unacknowledged part of that quality live in me? The goal is not to judge yourself, but simply to see yourself more clearly and completely. Accepting your shadow is the first step toward integrating its power and energy into your conscious life. And third, reflect on your own stage of life. If you are in the morning of your life, as a young person is, your focus should rightly be on building your ego, learning skills, and finding your place in the world. But it's also wise to plant the seeds for the afternoon. Cultivate an inner life. Develop hobbies and interests that are not just about achievement, but about feeding your soul. Read poetry. Spend time in nature. Learn to be comfortable in your own company. This will build a foundation of inner richness that will be invaluable when the sun of your life reaches its noon and begins its turn inward. What we've explored today is just the first step on a very deep and rewarding path, a single footprint on the shore of a vast ocean. Carl Jung's work is not a set of easy answers, but an invitation to a lifelong adventure, the adventure of discovering who you truly are. This summary is the map, but the treasure can only be found by making the journey yourself. If anything we've talked about today has stirred something in you, if you've heard a whisper of recognition from your own soul, I wholeheartedly encourage you to pick up this book. Reading it is more than just learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself, your life, and the world. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if this journey resonated with you, and you're ready to explore more of the profound ideas that have shaped the world's greatest minds, then I invite you to join our community. Please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next exploration of another life-changing book. Let's continue walking this path of discovery together.